In our top stories, the operator of the troubled Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant says the level of highly radioactive water in a tunnel of a reactor has been rising.
The Japanese government is seeking the support of residents around the Fukushima plant over the expansion of evacuation areas.
And finance ministers and central bank governors of the group of 20 nations have expressed support for Japan's recovery from the March 11th disaster. Now, the news in detail. The operator of the troubled Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant says the level of highly radioactive water in a tunnel of the number 2 reactor has been rising. Contaminated water in the plant's facilities is hampering efforts to restore reactor cooling systems. Leakages of such water into the ocean and the ground are also raising concern. Tokyo Electric Power Company, or TEPCO, finished transferring about 660 tons of the wastewater from the tunnel to a condenser in a turbine building on Wednesday. The transfer lowered the water level in the tunnel by 8 centimeters, but it began rising again, exceeding the previous level by 2.5 centimeters as of Saturday morning. TEPCO says work to fix the leakage of highly radioactive water into the ocean earlier this month may have caused water from the reactor to accumulate in the tunnel. The company hopes to begin transferring contaminated water to a waste processing facility by the end of next week. Highly radioactive water may also be leaking underground. On Thursday, TEPCO detected higher radiation levels in underground water. The observed level was up to 38 times that of 1 week ago. TEPCO began taking radiation readings 3 times per week on Saturday instead of just once per week.
Meanwhile, TEPCO will also step up monitoring to assess the environmental impact of radioactive water discharged into the ocean from the Fukushima Daiichi plant. The utility firm says it will measure radiation levels in seawater in 4 locations 3 kilometers off the coast and 2 locations 8 kilometers off the coast, in addition to the existing monitoring locations along the shore and 15 kilometers offshore. TEPCO discharged about 10,000 tons of relatively low-level radioactive wastewater from the plant between April 4th and 10th. This was done to make storage space for highly radioactive water from the basement of the number 2 reactor's turbine building.
The Japanese government is seeking the support of residents around the troubled Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant over the expansion of evacuation areas. The government on Monday ordered the residents of these and 3 other municipalities to evacuate in about a month, citing the risk of annual exposure exceeding 20 millisieverts. On Saturday, Deputy Chief Cabinet Secretary Tetsuro Fukuyama visited Iwate village and Kawamata town. In Iwate, Fukuyama apologized to about 120 villagers for causing them anxiety and worry. He said the amount of radiation observed in the village has increased and that the government is asking the residents to evacuate based on scientific data. He said the government is giving top priority to their health and safety. Fukuyama also said the government is considering building temporary housing and also renting housing for evacuees from the village. Some villagers said that as they are no longer able to ship raw milk, there is no other choice but to give up dairy farming. They asked that the government and Tokyo Electric Power Company buy up all their cattle. Fukuyama assured the villagers that they will be compensated for agricultural losses and said the government is also considering moving their cattle to neighboring communities.
Former leader of Japan's ruling Democratic Party, Ichiro Ozawa, has criticized Prime Minister Naoto Kan for his handling of the accident of the Fukushima nuclear power plant. Speaking on an online TV program on Saturday, Ozawa said the government's response to the nuclear crisis has caused damage at home and lowered Japan's credibility in the international community. He said the people of Japan have suffered doubly from such a response by the government. Ozawa also said Japan has to rely on nuclear power as a transitional energy source, but he also called for promoting alternative eco-friendly energy sources such as solar power.
You're listening to NHK World Radio Japan in Tokyo. Finance ministers and central bank governors of the Group of 20 Nations have expressed support for Japan's recovery from the March 11th disaster. The finance leaders of the G20 industrialized and emerging countries issued a joint statement at the end of their meeting in Washington on Friday. The statement says the global recovery is broadening and becoming more self-sustained. It says the disaster in Japan has increased economic uncertainty and pushed up energy prices. This indicates concern among member nations that the natural disasters and trouble at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant could trigger a surge in oil prices due to possible dependence on thermal power generation. The statement also expresses the G20's confidence in the resilience of the Japanese economy and financial sector. It identifies surging oil and food prices and events in the Middle East and North Africa as concerns for the world economy.
The death toll from the March 11th earthquake and tsunami and aftershocks in northeastern Japan has risen to 13,705. The National Police Agency says that as of 6 p.m. on Saturday, 14,175 others are listed as missing. The police agency says it has yet to confirm the number of those missing in Sendai City, Miyagi Prefecture, due to the heavy damage it suffered in the tsunami. It's feared that the number of victims will further rise. The agency says more than 137,000 people, mostly in Miyagi, Iwate, and Fukushima prefectures, are still living in evacuation centers.
Japanese weather officials are calling on people to stay on the alert as strong earthquakes are expected to continue for some time. Aftershocks continue to rattle northeastern Japan along the Pacific coast, although the number is on the decline. On Saturday, a strong earthquake occurred in the southern part of Ibaraki Prefecture, which is outside the zone where most of the aftershocks have continued since the March 11th earthquake and tsunami. The meteorological agency is warning that strong aftershocks may still occur. It's calling on people to stay on the alert for possible landslides and collapsing buildings.
In Hanoi, Vietnam, visitors to an annual cherry blossom festival have offered support and made donations for people in Japan who are suffering after the devastating March 11th earthquake and tsunami. The two-day event is held every April to introduce Japanese culture to the people of Vietnam. The garden of an international exhibition center has been decorated with 300 cherry tree branches flown in from Japan. A series of Japanese cultural activities are being held, including a performance of yosakoi, one of the most energetic Japanese dances, and demonstrations of origami paper folding and walking on bamboo stilts. Visitors offered donations for the people in northeastern Japan. A part of the sales from octopus dumplings and other food stands at the festivals will also be donated. A Vietnamese woman wearing a Japanese kimono said she's praying for the people in the affected areas and expressed hopes that they will overcome the difficult times.
An overseas Japanese high school has opened in Shanghai, where China's economic growth is attracting a growing number of Japanese expatriates. The ceremony to open the high school on Saturday began with a silent prayer offered for people who died in the March 11th earthquake and tsunami that hit eastern Japan. The high school is part of the 35-year-old Shanghai Japanese School, the largest of all overseas Japanese schools. The school's principal, Takako Yasuo, encouraged the 55 new students to challenge their limits in Shanghai, which is undergoing remarkable development. 88 Japanese schools operate in 51 countries and territories, but the one in Shanghai is the first to have a high school.
Finally, let's take another look at the top stories at this hour. The operator of the troubled Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant says the level of highly radioactive water in a tunnel of a reactor has been rising.
And that was the news.